my name is Chris West, and I'm a new instructor here at the barn in the Kitchen Arts Studio. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about a new series of classes that I'm going to be offering here in the new year. It's like culinary foundation series, and what we'll be doing is we'll be taking concepts that maybe you've been familiar with in the past and doing a bit of a deep dive with them, reinforcing some methods and processes with culinary theory and the science behind why some of these things work. The hopes is that with a little bit more familiarity with these kind of things, you will gain confidence in the kitchen, but also be able to have the tools and the knowledge that you need to maybe step away from a recipe from time to time and riff a little bit and feel and enjoy a little bit of creativity. It will also help you to maybe solve some problems that might come up in the kitchen. But really, the bottom line is to help you learn, help you explore, get into the kitchen, get your hands dirty, and have a bit of fun. I figured a really good way to introduce the class with the holidays coming up would be to talk a little bit about turkeys. So specifically because one of the first classes that I'll be offering is something that I call Roasting Realized. And so that's going to go through a lot of the procedures you would do for roasting and why you would choose to roast over one cooking method or another, methods for brining and why maybe you'd want to brine, and how to fabricate a chicken, how to carve a chicken whenever you're done cooking it, all of those kind of things, and little shortcuts here and there. So it seemed reasonable to start talking a little bit about turkeys, because a lot of us are probably going to be roasting turkeys. Some of us for the first time, some of us for maybe the 100th time. No matter what, though, there's always, like, every year tips and tricks and things like that. So what I thought I would do first is talk a little bit about, something that we hear that we should be doing. Maybe we're not always doing because it can be a little bit of a pain, and that's brining, right? Why are we interested in brining? Why do we even bother doing it? What does it do? So brining is really important, even though it is a bit of a pain with a big bird. Like if you're dealing with a 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 pound bird, figuring out where you're going to put all that water and all that salt and where the bird's going to go and how you're going to keep it cold for a long time can be a little bit daunting, right? So the reason why it's important and why it is worth all of that effort is because what it does is the salt. Whenever you have your turkey sitting in the salt for a while, it's going to do this thing called denaturing proteins, right? And so what it does is it basically causes those proteins to unravel, right? And that increases their ability to hold in moisture. So whenever you cook, you are less likely to run into a situation where your turkey is going to be dry. So cooking really is all about mitigating risk, right? Controlling chaos and mitigating risk, in my mind. And it's one of those things where you try to do everything you can to stack the odds in your favor, right? So when you cook that turkey, right, the heat is causing the protein to squeeze and get tighter, right? And what happens at that point is it's kind of like squeezing a sponge. A lot of the liquid comes out. So we want to figure out ways to try to hold that in, and that's what brining does. So another thing that I find to be useful beyond brining is a type of marinating, a buttermilk bath. There's a little bit of acid in buttermilk, and that's lactic acid that comes from lactobacilla. And what that's doing is, it's firming up the meat, but then it's also denaturing the proteins to make it so it's more susceptible to holding in the moisture. So it's really a cool little trick. I also like to use yogurt in this situation. So you can go one way or the other. My personal preference is to go with yogurt, and I tend to just kind of water it down a little bit. But what you do, take your buttermilk, you take your watered down yogurt, and you add salt, and you add some flavoring to it. I like, personally, there's this stuff called umami powder by Taki, and it's basically a mushroom powder, and it's my secret ingredient for a lot of things. And so I'll throw some of that in there. We'll throw the salt in there. Maybe we'll throw some sage, some green herbs, that kind of stuff. Everything that you would think that would kind of go along with a turkey flavor. Usually those green, herby, earthy flavors are really, really nice. Maybe a little bit of fresh bay leaf. I personally like fresh bay leaf over dried bay leaf, and throw all that in like a big old bowl, and just kind of mix it up with a whisk. So then what I'll do is you're going to want to kind of dip the turkey into that buttermilk yogurty mixture and let it sit there. Again, if you want, if this doesn't appeal to you, you can always just go with the brining method that we were talking about. But I really like the combination of a salty and acidy way to prep the bird. So the other cool thing about this, about using the buttermilk and using the using the yogurt, is that when you're done, you're going to let this brine overnight, right? You'll pull it out when it's done. There's going to be a big bowl of buttermilk and yogurt, and you'll definitely want to plan for how you're going to deal with that. We'll talk about that in a minute. You'll pull it out. I kind of like wipe a little bit of the yogurt off, but I want some on there, right? I want some on the bird. And the reason why I want this is in milk or yogurt, there are carbohydrates, so sugars, right? And those sugars, what happens is once you get above 325 degrees, this really cool thing called the Maillard reaction comes into play. And that's what browns sugar, right? And so you'll see it with bread. It's the reason why bread's got a little browning on the top. Your steak, if you take a steak and put it in the put it on a skillet at really high temperature, the browning and crispiness that happens there, that's the Maillard effect as well. So that is what gives your turkey this like really nice dark coloring that just looks gorgeous when you have that rock star moment. You bring the turkey out and everyone's like, yay. You can also get this effect by, basting it. People, that's the common thing, right? You're opening the oven while the turkey's cooking, and then you're putting butter over top of it, or the fats and everything that are dripping out of it. You can still do that. I like this way because I don't have to keep opening and closing the oven door. I'm not fiddling around with a big, heavy, awkward container. I'm not like potentially burning myself. And also, I'm usually pretty busy on Thanksgiving, so I don't necessarily want to spend a whole lot of time coming back and basting. So that's why I like this. I think it's a good way to add flavor. It's a good way to add browning. It's a good way to get the brining taken care of and everything else. So, but then you have the logistical challenge of what the heck do you do? So what I like to do, if you're in a professional kitchen like what we have here at the barn, there's all these Cambro containers and there's a big walk-in and things like that. We don't all have the ability to do that in our homes, right? We've got a refrigerator, maybe there's a second refrigerator somewhere in the house, but it's really full because you're cooking and you're doing all these things and there's big projects going on. So you definitely have spaces at a premium. So what I like to do is I'll go and I'll actually just pick up one of those brining kits. They're about $7, like at Town and Country. They come in a little like quart-sized deli container. It's got all the salts and like some aromatics and things like that. But what's really helpful is it's got one of those really big plastic bags. And I'm going to do a lot of my marinating, my brining and things like that inside that plastic bag. It keeps it nice and sealed up. And then maybe I'll lay it down in the roasting pan at that point and then put that in the refrigerator. It's just a little bit easier than a really tall container, right? Which is what a lot of times people have to deal with something like that, a big tall like stock pot or something, put it in there. One of my favorite things about cooking is a concept called mise en place, right? And I think a lot of us understand what mise en place is, right? It's everything in its place. It's the thought of before you start cooking, right? You look at your recipe, you look at everything you've got, and you organize it. And, you make sure that you've got the Marmite out, and you've got the tomato paste out, and you got the tomato sauce, and you've got the mushrooms, and the onions are prepped, and like everything's there, and it's in nice little bowls and everything else. Rather than just saying, hey, I'm just going to mise en place my ingredients and mise en place my recipe, consider mise en placing your process, right? Think about it, because it's one of the stressful things about days like Thanksgiving is that you've got people coming over, you've got a lot of stuff that you're cooking, there's a lot of things that you're juggling, and there's a lot of surprises that can happen, and surprises lead to anxiety and stress and that kind of stuff. So you want this to be a calm, relaxed, and happy day. What I do for that is like, I open up a spreadsheet and I write down all the dishes that I'm doing and the times and things like that. You don't have to go that crazy. The very least, just walk through it in your head mentally a couple of times and think about how the process is going to go and what you're going to do. And it's almost like you've done it then without like getting super tired and without having to do all the dishes, right? So you go through that. Maybe also just write things down if you've got an opportunity, even if it's just pencil on a piece of paper and say, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. That's the way they do things in a lot of professional kitchens in order to just keep their day running. It's their plan of action, right? But it's just mise en placing your day, mise en placing your time, and mise en placing your process. So it's something that I certainly recommend, and I think it will make the process a little bit easier. And speaking of making your life a little bit easier, an area that I've noticed many, many, many times that ends up becoming a major bottleneck during a traditional Thanksgiving dinner where you've got turkey and you want to have gravy is with the darn gravy, right? So you've got this turkey, it's done, all the other side dishes are done, and people are scrambling together, and you're like, oh, wait, no, I got to take the turkey, I've got to put it over on this other thing, this big, heavy, hot object, right? And I've got to wrap it up and let it sit over there, because it's got to sit anyways, right? So, and then what I've got to do is take this big pot that the turkey's been roasting in, and I'm going to make a pan sauce out of that. Okay, that's fine, but you're covering up a lot of burners. There's a lot of chaos that's happening right at this moment. That, in my mind, is the last time, like not the time when you want to be like building out a sauce, right? Remove that bottleneck simply by going to the store and buying some frozen turkey bones. You can go to Town and Country. I think Safeway is going to have it. Any butcher will have it. You'll have turkey necks, right? And turkey backs, like those are going to be all over the place, and they're going to be like $1.50 to $3 a pound, maybe even less than that. And you just need a couple pounds of them, right? So this is really nice because this is a segue into another class that I'll be teaching in the foundation series, in that it'll be a class on making stocks. So we'll share with you in that class, obviously, we'll take a deep dive into like the ratios of mirepoix that you're going to need to bones to water, and all the tricks that you'll need to make like an outstanding stock that's at a really, really, really high level. But for this is just gravy, right? So all we need to do is we take maybe about 2 pounds of bones and about 64 ounces of cold water. And you'll want some onions that are rough chopped. You'll want some celery that's rough chopped. And I'm talking like pieces like this big, right? Because you don't want them to disintegrate. So 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch, a large size. So you've got your carrots, you've got your celery, you've got your onions. That's your mirepoix. And just take that, in with the water, in with the bones, and heat that up. Once that comes up to a boil, lower the temperature down, skim any like foamy stuff that comes up, skim that off and get rid of it, and just kind of let that go for, I don't know, about 2 hours. If you have a pressure cooker, Instant Pot, you can throw all the things in the Instant Pot and do the exact same thing, just bring it up to pressure and let it go for about 20 minutes rather than 2 hours, and then do a slow release. So those things are really cool, because what you've done now is you just made a turkey stock, and that is one of the things that can take the longest time, is like extracting a whole lot of flavor out of this cooked turkey. Also, what's going on is you're going to get a lot more gelatin. So it's going to make a better gravy in general, and it's going to be more flavorful. So this is a really nice way to go to get that flavor. Then when it's time to make your turkey, now you can do this a day beforehand, even if you want to, or even 2 days beforehand, or you can do it the day of, it's fine. What you do is you go through your normal steps for making a gravy, and instead of using water in places, you're going to use, in water and the drippings and things like that, use your turkey stock, right? And so now you can do it. You don't need to wait for that turkey. And then right at the very end, right when y'all are getting ready to eat and everything else, you still have that roasting pan, right? That's got everything that you've cooked in it. You've warming up your gravy now. Just dump some of those drippings into there to bump up the flavor. And now you have this great gravy. And the thing is, because you made a stock beforehand, you're going to have what is almost would be considered to be a traditional sauce, a velouté, right? And so you've gone and you've made a velouté, and then you'll just turn that into a gravy, and it's going to be delicious, and it's going to be wonderful, and it's going to be good. Since we're talking a little bit about tricks, let's finish up here with a couple of other tricks that might make things interesting, right? So smoking turkeys. I'm a really big fan of smoking meats, and when the warmer, nicer weather comes along, I'll definitely be setting up some classes for short-term and long-term smoking and things like that, how to set up a Weber to do those kind of things, all sorts of stuff. So smoking a turkey, a lot of times people like to smoke their turkeys, but the problem is this, it's November, it's gray, it's rainy. I've had multiple times where I'm sitting outside, making sure that my temps are right, and the wind's blowing and the rain's hitting me and everything, and I'm freezing cold and I'm going back and forth, and the house doesn't smell like turkey or anything because it's all happening outside, and it's not the most ideal experience. It's cool, and if you're into that kind of thing, I definitely recommend you do it, for funsies, but I find it to be suboptimal. So the thing is, though, is because I have done it in the past, some of my friends have gotten very excited about smoked turkey or just having smoked things at the like for the Thanksgiving dinner. So what I've done to adjust for that is, remember I was telling you about the turkey stock, right? Rather than just using straight up bones, what I do is I smoke my turkey bones. I'm just smoking them at a very, very, very low temperature. So they're just saturated with a smoky smell and a smoky taste. And then from there, what I do is I make my stock. So I get this really, really, really smoky stock. And then I end up with really smoky gravy. And so I'll make a regular stock and I'll make a smoky stock. So that means I make a regular gravy and I make a smoky gravy. And people who are really into the smoke, they pour the smoky gravy over their turkey and their mashed potatoes and those kind of things. And people who aren't as into it, they go with the regular one. And you really kind of get the best of both worlds in that case. So that's a good one. Another one, and y'all probably have read about this a little bit, but it's the one of the biggest problems with cooking a turkey is that it's just a big round thing with a big hole in the middle, right? Unless you stuff it with stuffing, but I don't tend to do that. I make my stuffing separately. But the problem is that's not the ideal shape to cook something, right? You don't want something with a big like gap in the middle and like round with the most sensitive parts right on the top closest to the burner, right? That's why turkey breast tends to dry out a whole lot. So spatchcocking is what people tend to do to avoid some of the problems and also speed up the cooking process. And spatchcocking is basically you're removing the back of the turkey and you're removing the wishbone and you're kind of like cracking the breastbone, right? And you get it so it lays flat. And in this way, because it's laying flat, it's going to cook a whole lot faster. And the breast meat doesn't tend to dry out as fast because it's not having all this air running past it. So it tends to work a little bit better simply from a taste perspective. Like if you were to sit down and say, okay, what is the best way to make the best tasting turkey? Spatchcocking is definitely going to be one of those ways where you're going to end up with the best tasting results. Sous vide is another one. You could sous vide your turkey and you could just nail it perfectly and you would no longer have any dry breasts or anything like that. The problem with some of these other methods is you lose what my old neighbor used to call the Norman Rockwell moment, right? Where you come walking out and everyone's around the table and you've got this big old bird and you lay it down and it's just beautiful and it's glistening and it's brown and everything else and ta-da, you miss that moment because if it's spatchcocked, then it feels like, you're a bit of a culinary scientist, like, tweaking things as much as possible to get the best flavor, which is great. It's totally fine. Just keep in mind that there can be a warm fuzzy moment that you might miss if you don't have the whole bird. But you should decide what works best for you and with your people. On the roasting class, we will be talking a lot about spatchcocking and how to roast a chicken both whole and also spatchcock to save time and also to make it extra tasty. Well, that's all I have for now, and I really look forward to seeing you all in the classes coming up in the new year, and as we move through January, February, March. Keep an eye out for the announcement on those. It's going to be coming here really soon, and I hope you all have a great holiday. Thanks a lot.